Hello, everyone. I'm David Moon, CEO and founder of ARC's Nimbus, joined here today with John Kavanaugh and Andrew Patterson. We're here to talk about AI initiatives and gaining the cybersecurity around AI initiatives. And we hope to provide an insightful session for you and very important background for those who have launched or are in the process of launching initial cybersecurity around their AI projects. And I'll turn it over to John Kavanaugh.
And thank you, David. So I'm John Kavanaugh, president of Internet Infrastructure Services. We are a technology servicing firm since 2000, serving many of the global financial and public sector industries. I'm also a co-founder of our new Stratos ProCap 360 Knowledge Graph platform. So we're very keen in understanding data, how data is produced, and how data is used. And we will be focusing with David and Andrew on AI and AI bill of materials.
Yeah, thanks, John. My name is Andrew Patterson. I'm COO at ARC's Nimbus, and we're very excited to have you today. And wanted to jump right into a larger discussion, as David framed earlier, about the importance of AI and AI risk. So in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape, we're witnessing an unprecedented surge in AI adoption across the enterprise. And of course, we all know the promise in terms of growth and efficiency is driving a gold rush in AI adoption. And it's an exciting time for everyone that's looking at AI. It's also disruptive and a revolutionary time. To kind of frame this in a way to guide the discussion, according to a recent EY research, about 88% of senior leadership are now dedicating at least 5% of their total budgets to AI investments. And that's a remarkable increase from just 3 years ago. And as that report looked ahead, they said half of those leaders plan to allocate up to 25% or more of their budget in the coming years. But all too often, these discussions and investment decisions are being made lacking one critical topic, which is risk. And so here's a concerning reality to think about. So while organizations are racing to implement AI for those promises that they hold, they're doing so with that dangerous blind spot. In another recent report that I highlighted, that despite 96% of leaders believing that adopting AI would increase their security risk, only 24% believe that their current AI projects are properly secured. And even more alarming, just 18% of those organizations have established any form of governance to oversee AI implementation and adoption. So this gap between AI investment and risk management is one of the aspects that we want to talk about today, because it's not just a statistical concern. It's a potential existential threat with catastrophic consequences that will happen if AI risk management isn't also implemented as organizations seek to achieve the benefits that they're out there investing in. So today we're going to talk about some important topics. One, why this is a business imperative. Look at why AI governance matters, who in the organization should really take note of how AI is implemented across the organization. We'll also talk about AI risk in general, why it matters. We'll also look at understanding, quantifying, and communicating AI risk across the organization. And then lastly, we'll look at building a framework for AI governance, as well as the steps that an organization needs to take to implement. So with that, David, I don't know if you want to give us some thoughts about your views on AI and why it's a business imperative.
Sure. Thanks very much, Andrew. And, AI is a very, very valuable area, very valuable set, represents a set of technologies and approaches to business processes in particular that have not been available until only recently. And the practical applications here are immense. And we find that happens and those results happen in a couple of key categories. One of them is obviously revenue expansion. So opening up new offers of new services, new markets, new processes that can support new types of outcomes for customers. Second area is cost recovery and cost reduction. So AI has the ability to make existing processes more efficient in a variety of areas, from marketing to supply chain to operations, manufacturing, et cetera. And those are all great things. Now, what happens though is those also are met with a dependency. So these are not just, especially in light of the large amount of investment that's going into the AI area, these are not just science projects. They are actual dependencies on the part of the organization. We need to treat them seriously, just as we treat operating a truck fleet or a machine assembly line or anything else. And so we need to understand what provides operational assurance to those efforts once they are in production and fully operating. And presumably, most of them, many of them, if they were to have an outage or just be absent from the scene for a period of time, there would be costs associated with that. So all too often, we're not really understanding those dynamics. And what's really important is to make sure that we can take the steps to really secure these systems and provide them the predictability, and starting with the observability of the proper analysis, and then saying what can help advance the predictability of this AI-driven process so that we can really truly rely on it. And of course, that's where the value comes about.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, David, I mean, you raised some good points there, and you think about all that's at stake. It really is not a siloed approach to when we look at AI, right? There's a cross-functional stakeholder, both external to the organization, but also internally, that AI really should matter to, right? So for business leaders, there's the strategic oversight, the resource allocation. For technology teams, there's the implementation and security issues. Of course, you have risk and compliance for governance controls. And then, of course, legal, liability, and regulatory compliance concerns. John, when we think about all these stakeholders that are involved internally to the business, from your perspective, how does AI governance play into that from both a top-down and a bottom-up approach?
Yeah, so most of the business processes that are currently being monitored and measured are traditional processes. And what we've seen as a society, the use of mobile devices, now the growing use of Fitbit watches and other type of electronics is just exploding the amount of data. And the processes that were established before and measured before need to scale and accommodate this. I saw a study where around 2010, a human had about 250 digital interactions per day. Now it's over 5,000 interactions per day. So that's a lot of data coming from a lot of devices. And once we get it into an organization, right, we want to be able to categorize it, and we want to be able to leverage it for internal AI. And we want to protect the privacy. We want to maintain the security. We want to look at the availability. So all of the traditional measures are now being replayed, but some of the processes are different, and it's growing so quickly. Organizations have to be able to scale to the adoption of this new technology, and I think that's what we'll cover in a bit in terms of what are solutions going forward.
Yeah, no, I know, John, as we've talked about before, really the business is the data in today's modern world. So protecting that data, being able to leverage it in a responsible, secure way, obviously, will either hinder or is going to propel the successful implementation and use of AI going forward. And I think that's kind of the next topic, David, that we wanted to hit on, which is how do you understand this risk? How should you quantify it? And then how do you communicate that risk across the organization to all the stakeholders that we mentioned?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, quite thankfully, NIST has weighed in on this. For those not familiar, National Institute of Standards and Technology. And they've really kind of played off of a lot of their existing frameworks, which are quite helpful, like NIST Cybersecurity Framework, NIST 853, and others, and have built a structure, you could say sort of a superstructure on top of that, that properly catalogs the known vulnerabilities across AI models. And we're probably primarily talking about large language models, but also agentic AI and other AI developments are following a very similar pattern here. So we have things like the prompts that can be manipulated, models can be poisoned, a variety of areas. And these are known vulnerabilities that, depending on how the model was built, depending on how it's protected, and depending on how it's been architected and implemented, there may be these exposures to one degree or another, some of them greater, and some of them leaving the AI initiative open to compromise of one type or another. So what happens is that NIST encourages us to think around four basic dimensions of these, and that is map, manage, measure, and govern. And each of those is a distinct set of activities and things that we can actually measure. So if you think about the metrics that we can apply, we can tell the extent to which the interactions between these AI elements have been mapped, and the interactions between vulnerabilities and potential threats have been mapped. We can then measure those results, and we can measure the degree of our exposure to certain types of threats and to compromise overall. Only when we've got those two in place can we then properly manage. It's hard to manage what you can't measure. That's obvious in every aspect of business and technology. And then from there, we can really govern. And govern is all about establishing policies, basic processes and principles, guardrails, if you will, within which the AI operations and development can operate. So these are really important basic principles. And think about the kinds of things that have served us all well in cybersecurity in the past, now being morphed over into the AI space. And it's not a direct one-to-one. We can't just simply take plain vanilla cybersecurity practices and hope to have AI secured. We do need to be sensitive to these compromised areas, exposures, threats, and where the risks are really originating, not just the surface symptoms, and then be able to plot that against a reliable framework like NIST.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you think about what I always love about NIST, David, is the idea of putting context, measurement, prioritization, and a governance structure around that. Because we do have new risks here that are worth kind of breaking into some categories, right? So we have, and John, I know you do a lot of work on this, model and reliability and performance. Another risk exposure is data security and privacy. Regulatory compliance, obviously one, but operational resilience and assurance. It's very much tied to successful implementation, adoption, and management of both AI benefits and risk. If you could share some flavor that you have on that, John, that would be helpful, I think, for the discussion.
Sure. So, AI modeling is proliferating at a very quick pace. We saw basically a release by OpenAI, right, with a chat GPT. So it became a very easy to use at any level type of technology. Now, the traditional controls that are in place in an organization need to quantify how is this new technology fitting in with the current technology. And one of the biggest challenges is data classification. So if your organization has data classification today, you begin to build guardrails around it. So that's kind of like the mapping topic within NIST. And then if there's any adherence or violation, you now have systems that begin to measure, did we begin to leak some classification into a unauthorized arena? And then it becomes a management and operational practice. So that's what's evolving. It's not there yet. We're still maturing it. And yet we have organizations pushing it into production. So I see this as a contention. And we need to bring this to the visibility of management and say, um, keep doing it, but keep also protecting it, because we're just exploding AI in many, many more use cases now.
Yeah, John, you raise a good point about how do we communicate that and get that exposure across the organization. And that's why, again, we look at from an Arx Nimbus perspective, quantifying in financial terms. So you'll see a lot of, I think, more compliance-driven organizations, looking at AI right now. It's just really a checklist, or it's a red, green, yellow. And while that can help inform some of the discussions, it doesn't drive the types of awareness and visibility and observability of that risk across the organization the way that, as David mentioned earlier, one of the greatest measurements of all time, dollars and cents can. It's a universal language, the business understands it, but it does something even more important than measured. It allows you to align, right, that risk, once it's quantified in financial and expressed in financial terms, to the business outcomes that you're looking to achieve. And that, again, allows folks to actually communicate to senior management and across the organization, to all of those stakeholders. Here's what we're trying to get out of our AI initiatives. But there is a risk attached that we need to address in order to ensure that they are able to move forward in a sustainable and resilient fashion. And so, again, I think, David, going back to why it's important to build your AI management program around a framework and instilling strong AI governance, as you begin this process in your journey, is so critically important, because you don't want to do this one step forward, two step back. And as John just mentioned, the rapid development, not just of capabilities, but also of threats and vulnerabilities will look much, much different today than they will 30, 60, 90 days down the road. It's moving that fast.
Well, I think a good way to kind of sum that up, Andrew, is by saying, well, look, an AI innovation that's worth doing is worth securing.
Mm-hmm.
And these produce value for the enterprise, and we need to pay attention to how to sustain that value if we're out to accomplish some serious results here. So we've got kind of three basic steps that you can break this process down into. You say, well, these are the exposures, and I understand what you guys are saying, that, I can't just go off willy-nilly without attending to resiliency and observability and the manage, map, measure, and govern of NIST, et cetera. That's great. But then what do I do? What do I actually do about that, now knowing that those are key things in being able to deliver these results with predictability? So the first step, as we talked about a moment ago, is really to frame the risks. Understand them against a common taxonomy like the NIST framework, and then cross-correlate the risks. And this is where we look at AI bomb. And I know, John, you've got a lot of work that you've done in this area.
Yeah. So as an industry, computer science has been around for 60, 70 years. And unlike other engineering sciences, chemistry or biology, we really don't have the same hierarchy. And what we see today is, from an IEEE study, there's about 300 computer languages currently in use, with about 50 that are most popular now. So we've got this plethora of data formats, data frequency, and as we begin to pull these data elements into an AI framework, we're using now some of the modernization that's going on in computer science. So about 7 years ago, the governments came up with a software bill of materials. So it's adopting kind of like other supply chain bill of materials, and it's being accepted now. So we have an international acceptance that computer applications and the underlying components need a machine readable framework that can be constantly managed and measured. As we begin to now employ AI models, we're using that similar concept, but the elements in an AI model are different than just an application bill of materials. So the AI bomb is progressing throughout the industry. I don't think we have a final framework yet. We don't have anything from this particularly yet about you must have these minimum component levels, and then you can have optional ones. So there are frameworks and componentry being built. So what we look at is a very scalable and adaptable solution, which we call a knowledge graph. So as an AI model comes in, we certainly would like to know what was the reference or LLM model, right? What was the version of that model? And from there, you can determine what was the date of the data that was generated from, and then what were the algorithms and some of the other aspects of an LLM model. Then we have which production data sources are we pulling from? And most production data is aligned to an application, but applications support a business process. So we've got those two pieces coming in. And then we have where is the model running and all of the hardware and software componentry. And lastly, we collect what was the prompts, what was the history of prompts, and then what were the results. And if we get this down now to a manageable machine readable file format, now we have something that's auditable and replayable. And I think this will become a standard. It just doesn't exist yet. We're going so fast. So that's one of the risk areas. While we're using this, how are we collecting it?
Yeah, and you had a good point. I mean, it's moving so fast that to wait until there is, a standard or compliance kind of structure in place to conform around, it just isn't going to happen in the near term. Which is, again, looking at this as a risk management issue as opposed to a compliance issue, I think is so critically important. And as you mentioned, John, one of the things I know in our previous discussions, it's that SBOM and AI bomb interdependency there that I think you touched on a little bit. That's really interesting. And for those that might not be as familiar with AI bomb or SBOM, the bill of materials, it really is looking at the supply chain of your technology. Is that the best way to put that?
That's
and trying
exactly
to catalog that and being able to analyze it in a transparent way, which is exactly where people need to be going before this gets way out in front of them.
Yeah, and Andrew, that is really what allows us, once we understand the origin and nature of the AI initiatives and what kind of dependencies they have, to be able to now play back against the company's own financials and the expected benefits and results of these efforts, and be able to say, well, we can now give them a score. And that's where we have the AIA score, the IA score we're showing up here, which is really on a scale of 0 to 1,000 and shows us a lot about the maturity level of these efforts. And then over here, we really show the total potential AI risk exposure, but then what's currently been remediated through some controls and efforts. Those are gathered up and chronicled and documented, obviously. And then any insurance considerations around that as well. And this is it's a little bit worth mentioning here that insurance coverage for AI-related losses is really an emerging field right now. Insurers are clamoring to kind of figure out what they're going to do about this space. You have certain cybersecurity policies that are being issued with exclusions around AI.
Yep.
So for those who are watching the video here, check your policy provisions. And then you have really kind of an absence of really tested AI insurance coverage in this market. So we certainly don't have much in the way of case law around, if there's a claim and then it goes to court, what kinds of things are going to result in that claim being paid.
Yeah, and David, that gets to a really good point that I think is worth kind of hovering on for a moment, which is while the insurance industry decides what to exclude or to develop separate lines, the ability to have a good, transparent risk management program around this that you can show to an insurer. Because there are some underwriters out there that are trying to ensure this, but of course they'll need high levels of confidence that the types of governance is in place to manage that risk effectively. So as that evolves, again, having a track record and established policies aligned to a framework is critical to being able to demonstrate that you have the controls in place to address the vulnerabilities and threats that could impede successful AI adoption across the enterprise.
Absolutely. And the real key number here that we find many people are focusing on the most is what is the net AI risk exposure as a result of all of this? So after everything that's been remediated and any insurance implications that we have, what really is that number? And in this case, this was a sample study that was done recently on a defense contractor, and it turns out it's about 14.5 million. Now, what that really says is that we could have an impact of 14 million to the negative. This is an annualized number. If we don't really secure this model, and we really can't expect that. We've had actual real world results that have shown losses that have been and economic impacts that have been in the area of 7 or 7.5% from this actual number. So it's really a very good ballpark number. And what we have then is the continuous observability and remediation, which is the third key step. So once I've really kind of profiled what my risks are, where they're originating from, not just surface symptoms, then I need to understand, and this is a sort of a screenshot from the NIST framework, where we're dealing with about 65 specific controls that then are applied with evaluation. So I know if I can really address this particular area, and just to give an example for those who are not familiar, the ability to roll back my AI models so that if there's something untoward that's happening, something adverse, I can at least press the pause button and then roll back to an earlier, maybe more predictable version of that model. Very basic principle in all of IT, but it's not necessarily followed or being provided for in many of these new emerging AI initiatives. And just having that capability. Now, if I have 11 different AI projects that are out there across the entire enterprise, and I've got this provision for rollback on, let's say, 7 of those, well, then only a percentage of that capability is in place, and therefore the remaining percentage is my vulnerability, and I am vulnerable there. So all of these things can be measured, and then given my overall economic expectations for my AI efforts, I can really start to say, well, which of these controls is contributing more or less to my overall monetary exposure in rolling out my AI efforts. And that really kind of bubbles up to the govern part of this whole process, which is the board and CEO level assurance posture. And John, you want to comment on that? I know you've done a lot of work on that area.
Yeah, I think, it's in current use, right? KPIs, actual and forecast. And what we've seen in a number of cases with AI, you can get now a very unexpected change to your KPI forecast. So we want to be able to build a better communication system, almost a automated communication system. So we don't need to be down in the weeds as to how the AI models are working, but as we get new results, these could be either dramatically positive or dramatically negative. And there's been a number of cases where the learning models, the LLMs, are constantly being reevaluated, expanded, improved, enriched. So what yesterday's result was may be different than what we do with the same exact data today because the models are better. And these could have a material effect at the board level. So we're addressing that.
That's right on, John. And you think about how fast this is moving. It kind of goes to again what David's pointing out here, the continuous observability and remediation cycle. You're
Mhm.
constantly assessing, and constantly aligning and optimizing those remediation efforts. This will not be a static environment, as we all know. And there's a lot of unknown vulnerabilities and threats that are yet to be identified that will be coming on. So we look out at the 30, 90, 120-day window. The time really is now to put this into place, at least to get your assessment started. And so I think it's worth talking a little bit about, well, where does an organization start? What's that timeline? What are the next steps? What are the action items they can take today, starting today? And how long would it take to get up and running? Both from a top-down and a bottom-up approach, which again we're trying to bring here together. David, do you want to kind of start from a top-down approach? What would an
Sure.
organization need to do? What's that timeline look like from the Arcs Nimbus perspective? And then John, I'd love to look at where we go from your perspective as well.
Yeah, Andrew, and it's really the initial analysis that is very, very important here to get the foundation and set the stage for the kind of operational integrity that needs to be maintained throughout, especially once these efforts go into production. So getting those metrics right, getting them dialed in, doing the proper analysis, again, the IS score, and these are all really kind of key screenshots from our product that we rolled out really about the first of the year. And being able then to benchmark against other organizations and other efforts and what they're doing. And what's really an eye opener here is when the organization can see where their AI efforts are improving over time and what is really the trend line, what's working out there. And what we really encourage is if I've got a portfolio of, let's say, 7 or 8 major AI projects, comparing notes between them, getting the teams together, and now being able to look at them through a common set of metrics that say, well, the effort that's going on over in the production area is really kind of benefiting and its IS score is going up from certain things that they're doing. What can the other efforts over in marketing and in customer support, et cetera, really do to gain from that knowledge and what their experience actually is? And so everyone can learn along this path, and it really is a rapid learning curve for many organizations. So having those metrics is very important, and then having the tracking over time and being able to give this level of visibility or observability to senior management so that they can be part of the process as well. Because no matter what, there are going to be trade-offs about, well, we could go to this approach or that approach. What really are the economic consequences out of that? And that really provides a very strong level set to guide the process. And it's one that management certainly understands.
Sure. Yeah, and then there's a great trade-off here. I mean, I trade off a handoff here to our handshake here with what John primarily focuses on as well, which is our model, is a data sponge. And the more information that we can get about active vulnerabilities, capabilities, and the threats that are facing your AI model, the higher acuity, right, that our model can predict. And that's really where John and the work they're doing, looking at the AI bombs, the interrelationship between AI and software, as well as hardware applications. So John, can you give us a flavor for how all of this feeds up and the kind of information and timeline and actions that the organization would need to take to get that kind of clarity?
Yeah. So, some of the metrics that we've heard about 30, 38%, 40% of the AI that's being deployed today is not measured. It's not part of a standard organization. So it's kind of like we heard shadow IT. This is shadow AI. So from one aspect, we've got activity without management. For the elements that are being managed, right, the models are changing so quickly. So if I equate this to applications, right, if you're using a major platform, an SAP, a Salesforce, an Oracle platform, those variations come out in a very, repetitive but periodic period. So, you might get quarterly releases of improvements. The models are coming out, especially the open source AI models, by the hour, right? So some repositories I'm watching they're growing at 200,000 new releases a month.
Wow.
Right? So you're not seeing anything like this on the application side. So these models are bigger, they're faster, and now in this month particularly, we have a disruption, right? This is the DeepSeek release, which is a highly competitive result-based model at a fraction of an operating cost, right? So this is a game changer, and you'll be seeing, I think, a lot of execution changes. So if your organization has already set up a CapEx budget to put AI into the numbers that you were mentioning earlier, Andrew, and now we have a fundamental change of one of the major components of an AI model, you need to understand, are we switching to that? Are people switching without even getting approval to switch to that? And on and on. So I just think that the risk model that we're laying out here and the top-down view is very amenable to reacting to these changes. And what we're working on is a better collection system, right? How do we cut components into a knowledge graph and then report that back up through an AIA score? So the board sees just the score. The CEO, CIO, CISO, and operations teams can drill down to what are the actual elements now in representing this number, and what can we fix, what can we manage.
Yeah, and that top-down marrying of the top-down, bottom-up approach, the strategic with the tactical, is really the recipe for success in this space. And just John, real quick, just to clarify one point. I mean, how long in your, based on the clients and experience you've had, for someone coming in relatively cold, they've just started up an AI program, they've already expended some funds, does it take to really get that kind of clarity and acuity on the actual AI?
Well, very similar to your approach, we do the same, right? We're basically taking any existing data that they're using. So if they have asset components of applications, list of models, we bring that in very quickly into a knowledge graph, and then we have a visual display. So on the application side, we can do a component analysis within minutes, for 1,000 components. So it'll be telling how much data do they actually know that they're using versus what could we extract and help them see a bigger picture and a deeper, richer picture of the componentry that they're currently doing with AI modeling.
Yeah, and that's almost a secondary benefit, which is that creating that inventory that you're constantly watching and looking and building on as you build out your continued AI usage. So together, I mean, again, I think that's a highlighted point that we're not looking at 6, 8, 10 months to get up and running, that through automation and through sophisticated modeling, that top-down, bottom-up approach is able to come together relatively quickly and put you on success, well ahead of a 90-day schedule.
Yeah, and maintaining that observability also, John and Andrew, that's absolutely essential to this, because this is not something where we can take a snapshot and then rely on that through the course of even months to come, because the variables are moving so quickly, and the adjustments that are being made to these models and the way they perform, the way they're being applied, and the underlying technology and the LLMs that's driving it as well are constantly moving. So getting on that platform, that foundation, and getting that in place, and then being able to keep it vibrant and operational throughout, that's really essential to success in the AI area.
Well, I know we're hitting on time. I give, I guess, John and David one last opportunity. Any parting advice to give to business leaders, board members, senior executives, or the operations teams who are trying to wrestle with this? It's kind of a parting glance.
I would say let's just start a dialogue, right? I mean, we have a lot of good ideas, and we have demonstratable, production-ready solutions. We want to work with you and understand where you're trying to go, and show you how we can help you get there.
Yeah, and I would say get started now, at least with the most critical AI efforts, because we need to reflect the fact of the very substantial investment that's going into many of these projects and make sure that they are properly secured and that they're sustainable with knowledge of what that takes.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. Well, thanks everyone for your time. Thank you, John, for your participation, and David. And again, anyone can reach out to either of us. Our contact information is below. We really look forward to hearing from you. If you want additional information, of course, we were only able to scratch the surface today. So we stand ready to assist, and look forward to hearing from all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.